Appreciate everybody joining us today. So we're just going to move forward, do the best that we can. A little sneak peek at what we got coming up on tap. Of course, we got Matt Baker here with the Bookspan Baker team to give us our mortgage minute. As we mentioned earlier, we had all kinds of internet problems and not having Cox. So Todd, I think you're just going to get us some slides later on this afternoon. I'm going to do a little tips on Facebook and kind of how to get your presence out there. And then we're pretty excited today. We're going to have AAR's Nikki Salget on, stop by just what things we are facing and some of the trouble that we are getting into as agents. As always, if you got any comments or questions, please feel free to email us at webinar@westusa.com and we will get back to you as soon as we can. So with no further ado, which I still have no idea what exactly that means, but we say it anyways. Let's jump into some announcements. We are doing our next agent orientation today from 10:30 to 12. This is going to be via Zoom and in person, but probably not going to be doing it in person. So if you have not attended an agent orientation, this is your opportunity to jump on, learn a little bit more about West USA, and more importantly, learn about some of the pieces of technology and support that we offer each agent. If you've never attended one, I highly recommend that you do. I was in communication with an agent who was a top producer, been with us for probably over a decade, and had no idea, Nick, that we had a mobile app. So anyways, so with that being said and done, a lot of other announcements. We've got Awatuki's next office meeting is this Thursday at 10 o'clock at 10:30. So you want to RSVP with the office out there to get signed up for it. Also, if you're not familiar with NOC, you need to become familiar with it. This is a program that will help you develop and really get more business by having more opportunities available to people. So this is going to be in person and via Zoom. This is coming up this Thursday, March 10th at the corporate office, and again as Zoom. So this is an opportunity to learn what options you have for people who need to sell their home in order to buy, but they're not in a position to be able to sell their home. This is going to be a great option for them. Our next Scottsdale office meeting is coming up this Friday in person, March 11th, with our own Keith Flynn and Kyle Fouts headlining that. So the line will be out the door. It might get sold out early, so you want to get signed up and RSVP for that. Wherever Kyle goes, a crowd follows. Todd's got another upcoming remote CE class this Wednesday from 9 to 12. So if you're looking and needing more CE hours, this is going to be 3 hours of legal issues and learn how to generate more referrals. In person, Dean Becker at the Mesa office is going to be doing a CE class, 3 hours of contract law for those of you out in the East Valley. So learn a little bit more about mastering the purchase contract. Also, our next Goodyear office meeting is going to feature some tips and tricks on how to handle your taxes. I spent yesterday in the office doing my taxes, and wish I probably had a little bit more help with that. So this is going to be an in-person office meeting for the office of Goodyear. Again, all of our office meetings are open to all agents from all offices, so you want to get signed up for that. And then, as always, a little Don't Do That with Bob Stevens every Monday afternoon from 2 to 2:30. All of our events, all of our classes can be found on the West USA calendar. If you don't know how to access that, go to your dashboard, look for calendar, and you can click on the links and RSVP for any of these opportunities. All right, so all right, Matt Baker, let's bring Matt Baker in. Good morning, Matt. Thanks for working with us this morning. Let's find out what's going on with rates.
Let's just get right into it. You know, I think that most believe that when stock market goes down, interest rates get better. That's sort of typical what happens. You go from a stock market that's more volatile, more risky per se, and then you go to a more conservative bond market, which is where the mortgage-backed security market trades. Well, it's not really happening. Rates are kind of, ebbing sideways, as I kind of alluded to maybe a few weeks ago that would happen based on what the Fed's going to say next week. So that's really the big news, is Fed meeting next week. All this pressure from oil and gas and all the, sort of the geopolitical and geographic, worldview is driving rates kind of continuing up, really based off of, of just increased cost to live, right? I mean, gas, oil, all those things are really weighing on this inflation conversation, which is driving up rates. But I'd say that if I'm going to look for anything, I would focus on what's to come next week. All right, let's talk a little bit about today and what's something that maybe you don't know about. And I don't really talk a lot about mortgage specific stuff, but I think it's relevant in today based on just kind of what the family dynamic is happening out there. But family opportunity mortgage is kind of an unknown real product for conventional lending that allows you to buy a home for your elderly parent or your disabled child under primary residence rates, versus if typically you would buy a property for a family member, you're going to do that with an investment loan, investment property. That's sort of how it works. But if it's an elderly parent or a disabled child, you can buy a property as a primary residence. And so there's some rules that I put on the program. It talks about some advantages. I mean, they don't have to live in the property. I mean, obviously that's a big one. You don't have to do it with investment property rates. That's the other big one. So when we're thinking about this, now this is not for, adult age children. This is for, again, you'd have to, document disability. Obviously, for an elderly parent, you would document your familiar relationship, and that's how you would work through that option. But it's a really good option for some of us that have elderly parents, where that could potentially work, and obviously nice to not have to call in an investment property, even though that you're not living in it and you're the one sort of signing on the loan. Go to the next slide. Again, real quick, right? Talks about maybe the differences between a second home investment property and this sort of family opportunity mortgage. So again, I would just maybe look at this. I'm happy to do a co-branded flyer with you. Again, you can always email marketing@bookspanbaker.com and we can put that together. But again, this really gives you a summary of second home investment and the family opportunity mortgage. Now remember, interest rates on second homes are no longer different than investment property. The only benefit is that you put less down, right? You put 10% down on a second home versus 15%. I think most think you still have to do 20% down on an investment property. You can, if with the right credit score and qualifiability, you can do a 15% down investment loan. So those are sort of a quick little snapshot of how it works. Again, it's kind of a unique product. Not really many talk about it or even know about it. So I figured this would be a good opportunity to discuss it. And as always, the Bookspan Baker team difference is you got someone who's 25 years in the business that knows what they're doing. Oh, I think I have one more slide, but it's not, I think, as critical. Just talks a little bit about credit score requirements, talks about, the ability for you to qualify. And of course, you just have to prove, that this is your elderly parent or this is your disabled child. So just, real easy stuff there. And again, the Bookspan Baker and team difference, as always, right now, calling listing agents. I mean, I did it again this weekend. If your lender's not calling on your buyer's behalf, you're missing out. You're missing the boat. It's not a 100%, shining fix, but it does work. And we got to do everything we can do right now to help our buyers win deals. But that's what I got for the day. Thanks,
All
Mike.
right, appreciate it, Matt. That's a fascinating program. You got my head spinning. So yeah, maybe I will adopt Marge and I'll buy her a home and let her live in it, and then build some equity. So appreciate that as always, Matt. Marge is going to be on.
You're going to get yourself in trouble.
I know, and I can't see everybody since I've got the slides, so I'm sure I'm getting a look. But anyways, appreciate it, Matt, as always. We're going to jump right into our 3-pack and bring Todd into the conversation. So, I'm talking a little bit about Facebook and well, now I don't know what happened to my slides.
Uh-oh.
You closed the PowerPoint, boss.
Pardon me?
Click on the PowerPoint button, a little icon at the bottom of your screen.
Well, I didn't do anything.
Well, apparently you did, Mikey.
Well,
Hey,
apparently,
okay.
anyways. All right, so I feel like for a lot of us, I spend a little bit of time on Facebook, and I don't have time to get into the numbers, but the numbers are staggering to the amount of people that are still using Facebook. And Todd, you remember the day when what the three most important things were when starting a business, right? You remember those three things?
I don't know, Mike, what were those three things?
Location, location, location. That was everything. Well, now our people, our new buyers, our new sellers, they're on the internet, they're on social media. And so we have to develop a good presence because that is where they are at. So, and for me, when I'm on Facebook and I take a look at even my own stuff that I do, but I take a look at other agents' stuff, I think there's a little bit of confusion of who they are and what they are trying to accomplish. So hopefully we'll be able to clarify that. So I'm going to give you 3 tips to increasing your Facebook presence. Number one, this is one thing we don't do is we don't sit down and build what we call our client persona. Who is our client? Who is that buyer? Who is that seller? Who are the people that are on my Facebook page? And who are the people that I'm trying to reach? So if we are using our Facebook page to try to develop business, we need to understand who that person is and begin to build that persona. And some of the most important things that we need to keep in mind is what are the demographics? And of our what are the age and what's the income level, what's the background people, what are some of the psychographics, what are the values and belief systems that the people that are following me on Facebook, what do they share? Because as I understand those, I'm going to be able to build a better Facebook strategy in order to reach them. What are some of the challenges that they're facing? And I think this really goes down to the different age groups, but obviously some of the challenges that we're facing right now are raising interest rates, low inventory. We take a look at some of the pain points. Some people have got buyer's fatigues. They're a little hesitant about jumping into the real estate market. But as we begin to answer some of these questions, we'll begin to build a very specific Facebook strategy in order to address some of these things. You also got to figure out what's going to motivate them to hire you. I see, Todd, I see a lot of people posting stuff and I'm like, I don't know if I'd hire you based on what you are posting. So you have to figure out what is going to motivate them to hire you so that you can appeal to them. And then what kind of content do they prefer? Is your followers, stat driven? Are they video driven? Are they infograph driven? But Todd, some of these are some of the questions that we have to ask when reaching our Facebook presence or our Facebook audience.
Yeah, and remember, keep in mind, there's a couple of things too. The consumer feels the real estate process is confusing. Some people have it much more down pat than others if they're multiple home buyers, but people feel that this is a process that's trudging. They don't really like going through it per se. So we have to speak to some of those things, just like we've heard some of the companies out there that we typically don't like listening to. They're talking about consumers' experience. They're talking about, the consumer's feelings. They're talking about making it more convenient for the consumer. So when you're doing your blogs, you have to think about what the consumer's coming from, not necessarily just what you want to tell people, but you have to put them in a position to achieve the belief all by themselves. And you do that through stories, you do that through articles, you do that through pictures, and it helps draw people into the conversation. I mean, how many times have you gotten something received something in your inbox and you just went right by it because it wasn't of interest? You're not going to hit it with everybody. Everybody's got a little bit different interest, but if you try to be unique in the material, or you are educated in real estate and the knock difference, you can achieve you can overcome a lot of consumers' anxiety and unwillingness to want to maybe list their house in today's market by offering them options, like with Matt Baker when they do their Mortgage Minute. Put those types of things, I guess in the ultimate end is just be educated, offer them options, and then they'll listen more to you than they are to the same person who's telling the same story that the other real estate agent is.
Yeah, and I think even more, there's so many different types of things that we can post. It just really comes down to taking a look at who is on your Facebook page and who are you trying to reach. Because again, you're not going to reach everybody, but when you figure out who your audience is, and this really goes down to any marketing, things that you do whether they're open houses, whether it's neighborhood canvassing and postcards and whatever the case is. You've got to figure out who is your ideal client, and then you build your Facebook strategy. And Todd, you're going to love this website. This website's for everybody, but I encourage everybody to write this down. And after the webinar, go to makemypersona.com. It's a fantastic website, and you'll start going through answering all kinds of questions. And this website's going to actually help you build your persona. And when you go through this process, and I've gone through this process, it's really going to impact and dictate what it is that you are posting. Second thing that we want to do is we got to build our personal persona. And I think, Todd, this is where everybody, or not everybody, a lot of people go awry, because there's a lot of confusion. And when it comes down to being a real estate agent and a realtor, when I'm on people's websites, sometimes I'm often confused on what it is that they're doing, what it is that they're trying to accomplish when it comes down to real estate. So sit down and really take some time when you're taking a look at your Facebook strategy, and when you're posting. Every post should have a specific purpose. But what impression do you want to leave the visitors when people are on your Facebook page and when people see your posts? What impression of you do you want to leave them? How do you want them to feel when they read your posts, when they see your posts? Oftentimes we post stuff, and for me, I'm like blah 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 blah. I feel bored. I don't feel engaged. Sometimes I feel like an agent or a person is more about themselves rather than really trying to help me and reach people. And then really, how are you going to help them? You got to be very, very specific on how you're going to help them. Are you going to be more informational driven? Are you going to be more resource driven? How specifically are you going to express on how you can help people, and be very mindful of what your call to actions are going to be. And then, you've got to split that difference. How much personal are you going to be as business? If your Facebook page is all business, you're going to turn people off. If your Facebook page is all personal, you're not going to really get any new clients. So you've got to find that balance with how many posts a week are going to be personal based, how many posts a week are going to be business. Todd?
Well, but that's exactly your point, Mike. The point is that if you look at someone's website or social media site or Facebook page or Instagram page or whichever, and you look through it, whatever is the majority of content is presumably what you're into. So if the majority of the content is real estate, then you're into real estate. But if the majority of your content, you might have 4 posts about real estate and 16 posts about off-roading, then I guess you're really into off-roading, not real estate.
Yeah,
but there is that delicate.
But you have to post stuff to engage people. So my point is, if it's all business, people aren't going to be engaged. So I'm going to post 16 things about off-roading because that's going to be my client persona. I want them engaged so that when I do post about business, they're not going to simply ignore it.
No, I understand that part. I'm not saying don't post about those things, but I believe that there's, in other words, and it has to, if a consumer said, hey, I need some real estate information, are they going to go to your site? Or are they going to go to somebody else's site who's more of the demographic description option person? Or are they going to go to Todd's site because, well, he's got a lot of fun things and I'm excited about him, and let me post through, hold on, I'll find it sooner or later, the content. So again, I think it has to be equally as much on purpose, but it also has to be in purpose with your business plan. So, if you have a business plan that says you're going to earn X amount of money and you've got to sell so many 350 or whatever demographic house you've decided you're going to farm and go after, then all of your advertising also has to be in line, with that. You just can't say I'm going to sell anything and everything. You'd be a master of nothing, jack of all trades. So you really want to have some kind of a niche and drill down.
All right, and then the last point I think is important as well is, and I would say even before this, I would encourage everybody to hop on the West USA calendar, find out when the next class that Keith is teaching on social media and Facebook, because he's going to really help you build that strategy on what you can post, what other agents are doing to post. But when you figure out, how much personal, how much business, what type of post you're going to post, you need to make a schedule. And this is another challenge for us. is because sometimes we get really, really busy and then we forget to post. If you're going to work Facebook, you got to be consistent. Consistency is always the key. So for me, you know, I've created an editorial calendar, you know, Monday through Sunday, and these are the specific days that I'm going to try to post specific types of content that not only meet my personal persona, but really meet the needs of my client persona that I have built. And you know, and you got to determine how often and what you will post. Not to say that if you're not at a restaurant and you take a great picture of you and your kids, you want to post right there, that's great. But especially when it comes down to specific type of business posts, again, you want to be consistent. You want to figure out how often and what you're going to post and what days and what times you're going to do it. And then you got to leverage your calendar. You got to put these things on your calendar. You got to, you know, and as always in our business, you got to live and die by your calendar, but put it on there so that you don't miss those days. You don't miss those opportunities. But like I said, there's a million types of things you can post. There's a lot of Facebook groups out there that you can join for real estate agents that people share things that they've posted and ideas that they've posted. And again, I would attend one of Keith's class, but you know, Todd, it's always about leveraging the calendar and being, as you know, this game is about being consistent.
You know, and there was someone, I wish I could remember where I heard this from, but they used to say, if you're going to have, if you're in a business that has meetings, you should do your best to schedule your meetings all on one day. If you were in and if you had to do out of chore or out of office activities, schedule all those activities for one day. And of course, life happens and business happens. It gets in the way sometimes, but you've got to, you know, they used to call it time blocking, and, you know, and then they went from time blocking to other terminologies. But you could actually, with today's technology, you can go in and build something today. You could say, all right, I want to enter into the weekend gracefully, so I'm going to take Friday mornings and I'm going to do all my videos. If I'm going to run out to one of my open houses, I'm going to do all my videos on a particular day. You know, but you do those kinds of things and it just becomes habit forming. Now, every Friday morning, you know, it's your job to go out and start doing videos, versus if it's, you know, whenever it pops up, we have a tendency to have it interrupt what we want to do. And then all of a sudden, over time, we don't want to do that activity anymore because we didn't properly block it into our calendar. So.
All right, so yeah, absolutely. So I would again encourage everybody to go to makemypersona.com and attend one of Keith's classes. I don't, you know, if Facebook is done right, there is a lot of business out there. You've just got to figure out whether you're going to be. I want to go back to just number 2. You know, I see so many posts. It's all about me. I'm so great. I've done this and that. And really, at the end of the day, your clients want to know how you can help them. All right, Todd, appreciate you joining us today. And we will check in with you later on. But I want to bring in our next guest. Marge, I'm going to let you go ahead and introduce Nikki Salgett and kind of just lead us as we continue this conversation and talk about, I love this. I can't wait for this. And Nikki, so that you know, I never read these ahead of time. So it's going to be just as a surprise for me as it is for everybody else.
But it makes it fun for us too, Mike. It really does. And in keeping with what I've done this last few months, we've been bringing in attorneys that are bright and brilliant, and Nikki is right at the top of that list. And the reason I went to her, we hear a lot of times about the code of ethics and how we are bound by the code and how that differentiates us from licensees, and that we subscribe to it. And there are sanctions and there are penalties, and you know, we hear all of these things, and yet at the same time, the largest percentage of realtors don't even know what's in the code of ethics because they haven't been confronted with issues or problems. And this last few years, we've seen lots of complaints, lots of issues, and candidly, lots of problems. And so in talking with Nikki, I asked her, you know, would you come on, because she does handle the largest portion of this for us through the Arizona Realtors. And I said, would you come on and share with our agents what are the most frequently violated articles, and you know, help them understand it and why it's significant and why this is something that every one of our licensees and specifically our agents should read to familiarize themselves with it. And Nikki is our Assistant General Counsel at the Arizona Realtors, and we just keep abusing her and using her more and more. because number one, she cares, and number two, she's right on top of this subject more than anybody. And so, Nikki, having said that, if you don't mind, I'm just going to turn it over to you, and we'll chime in or not as we need to, because I know you have an awful lot of information for us.
I do. Thank you. Thank you for having me today. You guys can hear me, right?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah, we can hear you. And I probably am thinking I probably should have read these slides ahead of time, just hoping that I'm not part of one of these slides that I've done something.
She
So-
took your name out, Mike. She took
You
your
know,
name out.
quite frankly, I can tell you that, so I oversee the professional standards at the Arizona Association of Realtors. And so what I can tell you is more often than not, it is inadvertent by agents. So in other words, they think that they're doing the right thing, but they inadvertently potentially violate the code of ethics because they don't realize what the code of ethics says. And so that's why Marge, of course, jump in whenever you'd like to. I kind of wanted to just explain, we all know with COVID, since the pandemic, we've had a lot of frustration, being in our homes, the world changing on us. Most realtors, we don't like change anyways. Most people in general don't like change, right? And so the level of frustration with the economy, with politics, all of those good things, they've led to an increased amount of filings at the association. And so what I did, and what this presentation today is based off of, is I looked at the stats that we've had for the past year. So in 2021, so that would be 2 years of all these frustrations. We know all of the complaints that we've received, to really look at what are the articles that are alleged the most, and those thereafter are subsequently also violated the most too. So it's both. And so what I wanted to start out with is here just some stats so that you kind of have an understanding of how much people are complaining because the level of frustration is up there so high. So in 2021, our stats are, we had ethics filings, we had 209 ethics filings. The grievance committee forwarded 102 of those filings to hearings, and arbitrations, we had 29 filings, 17 of which were mandatory. Now, that just to give you an idea of grievance committee, they have a very low threshold for when an ethics complaint has to be forwarded. And ultimately, all the threshold for that is if there's a potential violation based on the allegations. So what does that mean? That means more likely than not, you're going to be forwarded to a hearing, an ethics hearing. And so why you don't want to end up here is because it's time consuming. You heard about all the time that you spend from Mike on social media and managing your business. You don't want to have to take away from that business because now you're dealing with an ethics complaint, with some sort of filing. So you want to make sure that you do everything in your possible that you possibly can to stay away from having a filing. And quite frankly, every time I talk about the code of ethics, I always tell everyone, you know what, as long as you follow the code of ethics, you're saving off liability. So in other words, if you're following the code of ethics, you're probably going to keep yourself out of civil liability. You're not going to have to talk to Rick Mack. You're not going to have to talk to another lawyer because you're already doing those things that you should be doing to begin with. And you're not going to put yourself in jeopardy of having some sort of filing, because we are really the first step that you're going to find some sort of filing in the association, right? So let me explain. So what you see on this first slide, and that's really, it's Article 1. So what I want to kind of explain to you so that if you don't have an understanding, because most agents, they understand, okay, here's the statutes. Here are what this is the law that I have to follow, and then we have the rules. So you always hear the statutes and the rules. Well, everybody knows the rules are the commissioner's code, right? So what you'll see, you'll hear me often refer to the standards of practice, which is kind of, and you'll see my slide is SOP. So that's what SOP stands for, is standard of practice. And now the standards of practice is just kind of like the commissioner's code. It goes into a little more clarification on what the article stands for. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I think that it's better kind of explain that way, because most people, they read them, they don't really understand. So what really does this mean to me? Now, you can't be found in violation of a standard of practice, but it helps guide you to those things where it would still be a violation under Article 1, if that makes sense. So the first article here is presenting offers, multiple offers, and counter offers. Well, that makes sense. Let's look at the market, right? Since, and especially in this past year, the market has dictated that it is crazy out there. And you have frustrated buyers and sellers that are receiving all of these offers, and you have sellers agents, listing agents that are not, you know, getting back to buyers agents. And so therefore the public then thinks they're ignoring me, they're not listening, they didn't actually present the offer to the seller, you know, and then come to find out after they're under contract, what if there's an instance where they're like, oh, and now they represented both sides, you know that they didn't present that offer, did they? And so these are the types of complaints that we are receiving that are saying, there's absolutely no way. We know that that agent wanted to double end that deal. We know that they didn't even submit their offer, because guess what? Now there's another instance where they close escrow and they're still following that property because they wanted that property. And now they see that that property closed for less than what their offer ever was to begin with. So those are the type of things that we're receiving complaints by, because as Todd said, look, it's a frustrating process and they don't really understand what realtors and what, you know, agents do on their behalf. They don't realize that, yes, my offer could have been more than what was listing, but ultimately, as things were negotiated throughout the contract, you know, throughout the process, yeah, they ended up at a decreased amount, but that's because there were all of these issues that needed to be taken care of throughout the transaction. And so there's complaints that are filed based solely, you know, on some of those things, just that the public doesn't understand. And so
Nikki, on our end, I want to talk about this from the listing agent's perspective. Because, you know, I mean, you know, as a buyer's agent submitting offers, you know, the MLS is saying that, hey, we're not presenting offers till Monday at 5 o'clock. And offers come in all weekend long. Many agents aren't even looking at them and not even looking at them till Monday at 12, and then they're going to meet with their client. How do we best protect ourselves as a listing agent?
I mean, so first and foremost, open and clear communication. And you're going to hear that so many times throughout every single one of these articles, is that if you can manage and set the expectations, that's part of the problem. When people's frustration is the highest, you know, or when they become, is because nobody managed their expectations. Nobody set forth, here is what to expect, here is what is going to happen. And when it doesn't happen, or if they're left in the dark, that's when they become frustrated, and that's when you're going to find complaints filed. Now, Mike, specifically talking about what you're saying is the code of ethics, and this could be as a listing agent, right? You could have your seller say, another issue that we've had is where the buyer has gone inadvertently to the, you know, or maybe purposely, to the seller of the home and found out that, hey, I just submitted that offer and please really consider me, you know, I really am interested in your home. And then come to find out, the seller says, I don't know, I haven't seen your offer. So then the buyer's going to file a complaint against the listing agent. So something to be wary of and to be careful of is, even if you have already stated with your seller, okay, we're not going to be viewing offers, or even to the buyer's agents, we're viewing offers on this date, you still want to ensure, because the code of ethics says that you will give your client the offers immediately, right? So you want to make sure that you forward those. Yes, Marge, I can see you wanted to add on.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, Nikki, the thing that I wanted to stress, because we have so many of our agents on here, and that is, this isn't just an Arizona specific issue. This is something that the National Association of Realtors had comments from all across all of the states. It is something that is a big issue there. And, you know, we just had a speaker from out of state that Nikki worked with also at our annual professional standards training. And one of the things that he brought up that I think fits right in here with this, especially when you have a seller, and it should be, that's where I'm thinking, Mike, it should be the seller who is giving these directions. You can certainly give advice and counsel, but it has to be instruction from them. And if they say, look, I'm not going to look at any offer until 3 days from now at 5 p.m., they have the right to do that, and you as a listing agent convey that. However, that seller can change their mind. that seller can see an offer that came in and said, oh, wow, this is fantastic. This is great. I want it. They have the right to look sooner. So as a buyer's agent, we have to know that those possibilities exist because that is reality.
Yeah. That's good stuff, Marge. I mean, and that's just the problem. I mean, you know, I want to talk about the multiple offer scenario with you, Nikki, because there is the code of ethics and there's the standard of practice. And then for a lot of agents in our minds, there's also the real world. This is a crazy market, and there is the way that properties are flying off the shelf, there is a temptation for us as buyers agents to go out and make offers on multiple properties on behalf of our buyers.
Mhm.
How do we protect ourselves if we are going to do it? Because I know that we can do it if done properly. But if not done properly, what are some of the risks?
Well, I mean, first and foremost, if you're submitting multiple offers on behalf of your buyers, you know, we have the Arizona Realtors has a form for that, right?
Right.
To let all sellers know, look, you're not the only property that I'm submitting an offer on. I'm submitting an offer on multiple properties because we know this market is crazy and your buyers want to be able to get into a home without having to wait to hear back, because we do know that they're waiting to hear from sellers. So you want to make sure that you, again, clear and open communication, that you let them know that this is what is happening and here's the expectations and this is what we are doing and this is how we are moving forward with your buyers, and let them know, you know, that this is, you have to, first and foremost, you always have to disclose that, because otherwise as an agent, you cannot be putting your buyer in jeopardy by not letting, but you know, potentially where they could be under contract for multiple homes too, if you're not using the proper forms, if you're not disclosing and they don't have the ability to purchase. But under the you know, I'm not sure, I guess, if you're leading to somewhere else to.
Not really, but I'm just saying the real world is this is what agents are doing is so saying, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, here are the market conditions. I do not have a problem. We're going to go out, and if we see 3 homes this weekend, we're going to go ahead and put offers, knowing that in the event, let's just say we wake up Monday morning and we're under contract for 2 homes, we can use the inspection period to get and use the bidder to get out of one of them.
Yeah.
I'm just saying this is what's going on, and I know you're aware of that. So I wanted to talk about like as far as the code of ethics go, how much, I mean, I want agents to understand that this could be problematic for us.
Right. So even you can see on the slide there, Article 1 stands for protecting and promoting your client's interests and being honest with all parties. That right there is going to be, if they found out that that's exactly what you did with you submitted multiple offers, but you didn't tell people that we have multiple offers, you didn't tell the other parties, and now you have your clients under contract with multiple properties and they can't afford it, and then one of the parties, it doesn't matter which transaction it were to find out, they could absolutely file a complaint against you, and you would be, because is that honest? That's not honest to all parties. If you were not telling them, not disclosing to them, and just saying, hey, don't worry, buyer, we can just cancel during the inspection period. That's what the inspection period is for. We can get out of the contract easy peasy, no worries here. But you're not protecting your client, you're not promoting their best interest, and you're definitely not being honest with all parties.
Okay, I haven't looked at the rest of the slides, but I want to bring up another scenario because this is what's happening. So we might be going down a rabbit hole here. I'll just tell you what I do, and I hopefully no one's going to file a ethics complaint against me. But I'm a very, you know, I feel like when I look at the code of ethics, it says to promote my client's best interest. So when I'm representing a seller, I have a conversation with them. We do get this in writing that we have authorization to do it. But as offers come in and as agents text, email, and call, I'm very forthright with where we are at with other offers. Because for me, my client's best interest is to get them the most amount of money. I know a lot of agents appreciate it because They know it's probably not worth, taking the time to submitting an offer if they're nowhere near close to what the highest and best is. Is this acceptable? And because I know a lot of agents, because I get from agents go, well, that's not fair to other agents. If I tell you where our highest and best is, and my response is, well, we don't owe a fiduciary responsibility to other agents. We owe it to our sellers to get them the most amount of money. Am I off base here? What are your thoughts?
No, I don't think you're off base. And I can tell you that you want to be careful with regard to the communication that you're having with the buyer side. I mean, more recently, we've had complaints filed where the buyer's agent thought that they kind of sealed the deal with the listing agent based off of the conversation. So you want to be careful with regard to what you're saying with that. Just say, yeah, we can get it done at X amount, because then it sounds like, the buyer's agent could misconstrue that and think, okay, well, they told me we had a deal, and so they were representing their client. So from that perspective, I would be careful from that. But I think that having a clear conversation, saying this is where we are, and as long as your sellers are okay with you saying this is where we are, then I think that that's perfectly fine with that practice.
Yeah, they refer to that, Mike, as shopping an offer. And can shop an offer, and there are some who will say you should shop the offer, meaning that if another realtor calls you and says, do you have offers? Yes, I do. All right, what's the highest one? What are the terms? What are the provisions? If your seller gives you written permission to disclose that, you can. You can tell them the price, the terms, you can tell them the closing date, you can give them all of those details. The only thing is, as a listing agent, I know I have an obligation to let my seller know there are inherent risks that come with doing that. Buyers who say, well, wait, I don't want to be put in a bidding war. Some have actually written into the contract, sellers may not disclose the terms and the provisions. The problem is the seller hasn't accepted that offer, so you can't restrict it there. So there are some risks in giving that information when you shop offers. So you as a listing agent need to explain that to the seller too. So yeah.
All right,
Nikki,
good stuff. Let's move to the next one, unless you have something else to add, Nikki, but accessing the property.
Yeah, no, I am going to add one thing, just because when I had the standard of practices, basically what it was saying, if to stop the frustration, if you are a buyer's agent and you're submitting an offer, you can ask the listing agent in writing to confirm that it was received and submitted to your seller, and that's part of what the standard of practice says. Same with the listing agent, if they submit a counter to a buyer's agent, they can ask in writing, and you have to respond in writing in kind, saying that it was received or submitted to your buyer or your seller, whichever side you represent. And that's why I listed some of the standard of practice. So accessing the property, this has been a big complaint, and you'll see under there. So the standard of practice that you see here are 1-7 and 3-9, because 1-7 applies to the listing agent. And so in other words, the listing agent gave access to the property against the seller's wishes, and so therefore that would be a violation under Article 1. And Article 3, Standard of Practice 3-9, is when the buyer's agent provides access to the property against the seller's wishes or the agent's wishes, either one. And so what we see most times there is when we've seen we had a open house at the property, and they had a fire thrower at the property, and so then the damage was thereafter caused to the property. If somehow, do you think that the seller was going to be okay with that? That's giving access that you would never be okay with. Giving the keys before close of escrow, we know, is the property the buyer's before close of escrow?
Nope.
Not the buyers, right? Sellers are incensed when that happens. It shouldn't happen. Close of escrow until that property is recorded. It is not the buyer's property. And there are some agents that have, I don't know if they folded under pressure or just they're decided I'm going to be out of town tomorrow, so I'm just going to leave them underneath a rock at the front door, and that way the keys are handed off, but then the buyer gets access to the property before it's recorded. entering the property without permission. Let's say they contacted the listing agent, and the listing agent was like, no, you know, this isn't what the seller wants. They're going to be home. They haven't had an opportunity to clean the house, clear the animals out, whatever the case is. And so we don't want anybody visiting the home right now. We can't do it at that time, because a lot of times, when do they want to see the home? Last minute, right? It's like, they're, oh, my buyers were driving past this home and they saw it. Can we enter? And if they were to say no, and you entered anyways, even, you know, through via the lockbox, whatever the case, that could be accessing the property without.
Well, I think it's also important to understand, because we'll get questions from our team on this as well. I want to show the home. I've got my buyer in the car. We submitted a request through showing time. They have not responded, but the house is vacant. And I'm like, you still do not go in, even if the house is vacant.
Right. Because, you know, neighbors tell all. And so even if, when they haven't answered you, we all know that the neighbors know everything, and the neighbors are the ones that always seem to tattle on you after the fact, which, you know, is how people learn information thereafter. And so that, if that's not what the seller wanted, you shouldn't be doing it. You should wait and make sure you have permission at all times. So misrepresentation.
Right,
Sorry.
Yeah, I'm just saying, if we move on, I know we do have some questions coming in, so we're going to provide everybody with Nikki's email. So if you do have any, you know, additional questions, feel free to email her. So, all right, let's talk about misrepresentation, exaggeration, and concealment. So, my first question is, I've got a vacant home. I have a company go out there and take pictures, but they have virtual furniture. And they can virtually change the way a room looks with colors and not. Appropriate, okay, or not?
I think in my understanding, and I'm not as savvy with MLS, so I'm going to put that out there now, because I don't make MLS rules. We don't have an MLS. Each MLS is different. My understanding from practitioners is make sure it's always disclosed on the MLS. This is virtual staging. Right.
Oh,
so
good.
As long as you have virtual staging, you know, so this isn't the true representation, then that's where you at least the public knows not to. Now, we already know all the MLS sheets, the planos always say, you know, do not rely on these representations. But it's clear, and you can't say that they didn't know if it's stated right across it, right across your pictures, virtual staging. Or so that they know, and they can't thereafter come back and say, I didn't know. I thought that this is what it's supposed to look like. Because I can tell you, which is funny, Mike, is that's exactly usually where we're going to have complaints is, and it's also going to be in Article 12, is off of the advertising. This is not what was in the picture. This is not what we saw. You showed this home, you know, and it's fully furnished, and this isn't the furnishings that came with the property when we actually rented the property thereafter.
Yeah.
Right. So as long as you disclose those items and have it up front, then you're not misrepresenting, exaggerating, or concealing. But if there's no type of disclosure, how would the public know? They tend to rely on those things that they see in the photographs. And I can tell you right now that the bulk of lawsuits always come after close of escrow, and it's going to be the buyer suing, you know, the sellers and the agents, because, you know, lawyers wouldn't be doing their job if we didn't make sure everybody that was in the transaction wasn't somehow brought into the lawsuit. And this is why you love us, right? So, and it always revolves around this article, really. So most of them are going to, because it's misrepresentation, exaggeration, concealment, because just as, you know, we discussed earlier, buyers don't understand. They think it's the agent's job to disclose all material information about the property. They think if, a lot of times, so we already know agents are not under a duty to inspect or investigate or to find, you know, latent defects with the property. We already know that's established law. Nobody, you know, agents do not have that duty, period. What agents can do is they can forward that information that they know from their seller, or that they've been provided by their sellers, to the buyers. And so buyers automatically think that, hey, the agent didn't do this, when it's not the agent's responsibility. And so that's where you want to be be careful, you know, and same thing with home was fully remodeled, right? And it wasn't actually remodeled. All of a sudden you see those pictures where this is not remodeled at all. You might have put a new toilet in, but there's no going on it. So things like that is where you're going to find those kind of filings for ethics.
Now, yeah, so we got about 5 minutes left. This is good stuff. So I want to try to move along here. Exclusive representation, huge challenge right now.
Yeah, and whenever it's a tight market, you're going to see an increased filings in Article 16, which is interfering with exclusive representation, and subsequently Article 15. Exclusive representation. Now, remember, agency is not the same as having exclusive representation, and that's where we have a lot of problems and where people get confused, is because do you have a buyer broker exclusive employment agreement? Because that's exclusive representation, right? Are you under a listing contract? That's exclusive representation. You have, you know, you've signed some sort of agreement saying you exclusively represent. Now, the problem that we have is a lot of times at an open house, you'll see, they'll just say, are you represented? But they don't follow up with the next question, because what do we know about buyers? Buyers want to see that home. They're not going to tell you necessarily, right? They might say, oh, no, I didn't sign anything. I'm not represented, because what are they afraid of? They're afraid you're not going to show them the home if they walk in by themselves. That's more often than not. Wouldn't you say, Marge?
Yeah, I was going to say the other part of it is they don't understand what we mean by representation. And so that's where one of the things that I'll stress is ask, are you under any form of an exclusive representation arrangement with another realtor? Because it's alluding to it. And, you know, they'll sometimes think, well, I'm not sure, because they think the ready form or our agency disclosure form ties them to that. Interestingly enough, though, many of the agents think sign form, they have exclusive representation, which is not.
Right. And I know you switched the slide, but I just want to say, because ultimately exclusive representation usually ends up in an Article 15, which we like to generally refer to it as kind of like the defamation article, because you could say, someone with a listing or a buyer's listing agent would say, hey, they did such a bad job advertising your property. I could do so much better than that. Whatever they're doing for you, their marketing is terrible. That could get you in trouble right there, and have an ethics filing for Article 15, because you're basically saying something that their business practice is not good. And
okay, so we're gonna hang out on the slide. So, okay, so this happens quite often. House is listed, okay. And maybe it's one of my neighbors or somebody else, and we get to talking, and the house is listed, but they say, hey, I would love to sit down with you and have a conversation with you. What are we permitted to do, and what are we not permitted to do in that situation? And I would just say, in that, when they do start complaining about their agent, I don't go negative and slander them, but it's more of, if I had this house listed, these are the things that I would have done.
You can do that, Mike. Standard of Practice 16-6 says, as long as you did not intentionally, directly, or indirectly solicit that, if that party came to you without you directly or indirectly soliciting it, you can go over, you can tell them what you would do, you could tell them how you could do it. You can even take a post-dated listing. Now, and then you have to stay out of their life until that listing goes into effect. But I mean, it is permitted, and it's Standard of Practice 16-6 that will address that part of it.
But I would still be careful about those conversations, because, telephone, when we were in kindergarten, what they say to their agent after a conversation with you could totally turn the way that they interpret. So just be careful, right?
True. All right. Yeah, we got about 2 minutes left, Nikki. I'll just start off on the slide. If it is not boilerplate in something that is located in transaction desk, and I don't know why agents don't do this. We've got 5 brokers on staff. Anything creative that I need to do as far as the contract goes, I'm running it by the brokers.
Yes, because you'll see my last slide after this says always ask your broker. but yeah, so article yeah, if you aren't sure, always ask your broker. The main thing that we see under Article 9 is that typically the client doesn't believe that, says, well, I didn't receive a copy of that, right? I never received a copy. It wasn't explained to me, or it wasn't in clear and understandable language. So those are the three things that you're going to see under Article 9. And you are absolutely correct. Don't get creative. Page 8, Section 8 isn't there for creativity writing. That's not what, that's not why we created that page. It's not why it's that long. Unfortunately, any lawyers would sit there and say, please don't just decide to write in everything you want. I know when I was a hotline attorney, when I would take questions about verbiage in Article 8 or in Section 8, sorry, I would say, so what was the intent of the parties? And because if it's not clear, you have to know what the intent of the parties were. You're supposed to, it needs to be clearly written, and that's not clear language. And we're not here, we don't get to interpret those additional terms that people are adding to the contract. And so you have to be careful about that. And part of what my notes here say too is this is Rick Mack's biggest heartache, right? He said in risk management meeting a couple of months ago, he was like, please just don't stay away from it. You're going to cause confusion. You're going to create the contract to conflict with itself. You have to be careful. Always pass it through your broker unless it's something that AAR has really created for you.
And speaking of that, I would say, we get a lot of contracts offers where other agents are trying to creatively write a appraisal gap or waiving appraisal. And it boggles my mind because we do have a revised additional clause addendum in transaction desk. Do not try to rewrite that. It is right there, designed to protect both parties. And then the other thing I would add is our broker staff does have language that I use all the time for escalation clauses. I know people don't like escalation clauses, but it's the market that we're in. It's there. I just copy and paste it all and put it on page 8.
Yeah, so just whatever you do, and if you pass it through your broker, here's the reason why we always say go to your broker. Your broker has probably been through most all of these scenarios at some point in time. And while you might think you can draft it, they've probably seen it drafted that way at some, throughout their tenure, and they could find the loophole and help you tie it up so that you're not going to have any issues with that additional verbiage.
All right. Nikki,
thank you for coming.
This is fantastic. I can't wait to have you back. Thank you so much, Marge. Thank you so much for introducing Nikki to us. And well, you just got rid of the PowerPoint slide for me, Nick, so I can't now see the, I didn't do anything. All right. So Nikki, thank you so much. I leave everybody with the quote of the day: to be successful at anything, you don't have to be different. You simply have to be what most people aren't: consistent. Appreciate everybody joining us today. Go out and sell a home.
Thanks, Nikki.
Thank you.